I'm Leldon Langley, the Director of the Division of Watershed Management at Mass DEP, and am speaking to you today about new regulations that Mass DEP has promulgated. Next slide, please, Andrea. So today we're going to run through a little bit of information about the statute, and what I'd like to emphasize is what the boards of health need to know. We'll give you an overview of the regulations, the events that require notification by permittees, and some other information that applies to permittees, so you can understand, the context of the regulations and the role that the boards of health will play in implementation of these regulations, and specifically. Some of the things that relate to boards of health are the public health warnings, the environmental justice components, and we will have some conversation about signage. Next slide, please. The statute was passed in January of 2021. It's known as an act promoting awareness of sewage pollution in public waters. It takes effect 540 days after passage, which works out to be July 6th of 2022. There were 3 elements in the statute that required Mass DEP to do specific things, one of which was to promulgate the regulations, which we have done. The second is to post event notifications on our website within 24 hours of receiving them from permittees, and provide access to the notifications and timely updates. We are in the process of building a data system that is in sort of the not quite to the test phase, but that website or data system we expect to be up and running by, well before the July 6th start date, and should have everything functional by that date. We also have to publish an annual report each May that gives a summary of the reported events and the total volumes and so forth in May of each year. Next slide, please. So the regulations are known as the notification requirements to promote public awareness of sewage pollution, 314 CMR 16. We public noticed those on October 4th, and that comment period ran through November 8th. Of 2021, during that period, we did have a session with boards of health to at least call attention to the regulations and the opportunity to comment. The final regulations were promulgated on January 7th of 2022, and the majority of the provisions take effect on July 6th of 2022, as I've mentioned. Next slide, please. So these are the elements we're going to focus on and emphasize today. This is what local boards of health need to know. The initial action that you may be asked to participate in is coordination with permittees on signage. Permittees have a requirement to post permanent signs at select locations. One is located at the outfall point of combined sewer overflows, and the others are located at public access points that are down gradient of those combined sewer overflows. You may not be familiar with the term combined sewer overflows. In the next few slides, we're going to help you get familiar with that, explain what they are, and give you that background. So if permittees contact you for the purposes of selecting public access points at which public signage should be posted, we are also providing to you some resources to assist in finding appropriate public access points. Those will include GIS layers that have identified the Department of Fish and Game and Department of Conservation and Recreation boat ramps and fishing piers, as well as state-regulated resources such as shellfish growing areas and public bathing beaches. There may be other public access locations that would be appropriate for you to post signage at. These might be locations that are within municipal control, such as public parks, municipal landings, and other types of municipal access points. In addition, you will be, need to go back, please, thanks. Public advisory notifications will be sent from permittees when a regulated event occurs. And so we'll talk a bit about what it means when you get a notification from the permittee and what actions may be warranted by boards of health. The boards of health do have responsibilities that are detailed in the regulations at 314 CMR 16.09. That section of the regulations provides all the information about that are applicable to boards of health, including the issuance of public health warnings and placing of temporary signs, which are the two major elements that boards of health are responsible for. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are three types of events that require notification. The first is combined sewer overflows, which we'll explain in just a moment. Certain types of sanitary sewer overflows, which we'll also provide an overview of. And discharges of partially treated wastewater, including blended wastewater. So partially treated wastewater can include, any type of discharge from a treatment plant's outfall, which has bypassed or part of the treatment process or not received full treatment. The statute is specific to requiring notification for discharges of untreated or partially treated wastewater. And some wastewater treatment plants that have combined sewer overflows use blended wastewater as a mechanism to both reduce the amount of combined sewer overflow discharges that occur, and also to avoid having a negative impact on their treatment process, because high flow events at treatment plants can cause a washout of the bacteria that provides secondary treatment at treatment plants. So that process is known as blended wastewater, and it is subject to the provisions of the statute. Next slide, please. So let's go over what is a combined sewer overflow. This diagram is going to help you understand that. It essentially involves locations where there are collection systems that convey both sanitary sewage and stormwater in the same pipes. This is kind of a design feature in many older cities within the United States, including a number of cities around Massachusetts. In these events, they work well and properly convey sanitary sewage to treatment plants in easily in dry weather events. But during wet weather events, particularly ones of high intensity, they may the total flow may exceed the carrying capacity of the pipes, and result in discharges from an outfall pipe that goes to a water body. Most of these, probably all of these types of combined sewer overflows have some type of regulator, such as a dam or weir or other device that is intended to minimize or prevent altogether discharges into the water body. But it can be, the height of those can be exceeded and discharges can occur. And the main reason why there is a sort of a directed location for discharges from combined sewer overflows is to minimize risk to the public by having any overflows conveyed to a location that is least likely for where the public is least likely to come into contact with it. So that diagram on the right hand side during wet weather kind of shows you what happens during those wet weather events when carrying capacity of the pipes are exceeded. Next slide, please. There are 19 sewer authorities in the Commonwealth that have combined sewer overflows. So if your community appears on this slide, the name of that community appears on this slide, then you know that you are one of those that have combined sewer overflows. There are some regional authorities such as Greater Lawrence Sewer District, the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, and the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. On the right-hand column of these listed communities, you'll see that the Mass Water Resources Authority has combined sewer overflows in 4 different water bodies: Boston Harbor, the Charles River, the Mystic River, and Alewife Brook. So while you might be one of the 61 different communities that are served by MWRA sewer, you may not have a combined sewer overflow in your community. It's only those communities that are located in one of these 4 watersheds: the Boston Harbor, Charles River, Mystic River, and Alewife Brook. The others listed on this slide are municipal systems that have their own combined sewer overflows. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is a sanitary sewer overflow, or SSO? It's any overflow, spill, release, discharge, or diversion of untreated or partially treated wastewater from a sanitary sewer system. And these can be caused by breaks in sewer mains, pump station failures, blockages in a sewerage pipe, and in some events that the flow in the pipe also exceeds the carrying capacity within the pipe. Not all sanitary sewer overflows require notification under 314 CMR 16, but all SSOs require reporting under 314 CMR 12. You need not concern yourself with this if you are a Board of Health, because a representative of the Board of Health, because it's up to the permittees to determine if an event is a regulated event and subject to the requirements of 314 CMR 16. So this information about SSOs is really being presented to you primarily for informational purposes. Next slide, please. There are 3 types of SSOs that are regulated under 314 CMR 16. The first is any SSO that discharges through a wastewater outfall. Note that I'm indicating it's a wastewater outfall, not a stormwater outfall, either directly or indirectly to a surface water of the Commonwealth. This is a provision that we included because of language in the statute. There are some instances where sanitary sewer systems are directed to a wastewater outfall, and those, are by design, again, to minimize potential risk to the public. So if it's a sanitary sewer overflow that goes through a wastewater outfall, that is one type of regulated SSO event. Another is an SSO that flows into a surface water of the Commonwealth and is the result of the sanitary sewer system surcharging under high flow conditions when peak flows cannot be conveyed to publicly owned treatment works due to capacity constraints. And the third is any SSO that flows into a surface water of the Commonwealth and is a result of a failure of a wastewater pump station or associated force main designed to convey peak flows of 1 million gallons per day or greater. And we sort of implemented or designed this particular one into the regulations because, in our view, a sanitary sewer system pump station that has 1 million gallons per day capacity likely would pose a public health threat in the event of its failure. Next slide, please. When one of these regulated events occurs, and remember we also talked about partially treated wastewater or blended wastewater in addition to SSOs and CSOs. So when one of these events occurs, the permittee is required by statute to issue a public advisory notification. They must issue it within 2 hours of discovery. Our regulations define what discovery is and the sort of steps they have to go through to determine discovery, that an event is actually occurring. And the statute required that that notification be sent to state, federal, and local agencies, including boards of health in affected municipalities. Now, boards of health in affected municipalities may mean the municipality in which the CSO outfall is actually located, but it can also mean a municipality which is downstream, down gradient of a CSO outfall, where the sewerage or partially treated wastewater that is discharged from it remains a potential threat to the public. And so the permittee would notify a municipality, even though they may be further downstream than the municipality where the outfall is located. And then these public advisory notifications require specific information to be included, and that info is detailed in the next slide. So here's the information that you will see when a permittee sends you a public advisory notification. Just giving you a moment to take a look at that. We really don't need to talk about all of the details of that. Okay, next slide, please. Permittees are also required by statute to maintain a website and provide permanent signage. The website is required to have a map of the outfalls, the summary or status of a long-term control plan, which each of the CSO communities has as a way to either for those outfalls which have not been eliminated altogether, for them to be controlled and to minimize discharges from that CSO outfall. It will have links to CSO reports and instructions for subscribing to notifications. So this subscription piece is an important aspect of the law because it gives people who may be interested in knowing when these types of events occur the ability to subscribe directly through the permittee's website. Permittees are also required to post permanent signs at each outfall, which is already required by their surface water discharge permit, sometimes known as NPDES permit. And there's also new permanent signage that's required at public access points affected by CSO discharges. And I mentioned this earlier in the presentation as something that the permittees may contact you about to seek your opinion or assistance in determining those public access points. There is specific content specified in the statute and the regulations that must be contained on the signage. And as I've said, the number of signs and locations are to be determined through the CSO public notification plan, which is being prepared by permittees in consultation with boards of health in municipalities affected by the discharges. Next slide, please. The CSO public notification plans are due to Mass DEP on May 1st. Those are the preliminary plans, so that's coming up in less than a month now. There are final plans which are due January 12th of 2023. They will describe the method of detecting the discharges and estimating the volume of discharges. Basically what this means is whether the permittee uses some type of metering or modeling to determine when an activation occurs and project what the volume of discharge is. And then it will also contain information about the website, the signage, and measures to communicate to environmental justice populations. We'll talk in more detail later in the presentation about what is meant by an environmental justice population, how they're defined, and how they are treated in these regulations, specifically to provide language translation to environmental justice populations who may lack English language proficiency. As we've talked about, boards of health will be consulted about the locations of these signs. The SSO public notification plans are due to Mass DEP on July 6th of 2022, and they will include information about the website and measures to communicate to EJ populations. It should be noted that CSO outfalls, CSO discharges are always at a known location. You know, we know where all the CSO outfalls are located. However, with a sanitary sewer overflow, it is not necessarily possible to predict where one will occur. It could occur anywhere in the system due to that breakage of a pipe or you know, a blockage or some other, you know, sort of failure of the collection system or sanitary sewer system. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, when permittees issue public advisory notifications, certain events require that boards of health issue public health warnings. DEP was required to consult with the Department of Public Health on standards for municipal boards of health to issue these warnings, and we have developed and adopted those standards into our regs. The public health warnings are triggered when boards of health are notified by a permittee of These three types of events, or two really. One is the CSO and partially treated discharges that exceed 2 hours in duration. So CSOs can occur, intermittently. So if you have an intense rainfall period and water is backing up in the pipes, not being able, the pipes are not able to convey all of the flow, that CSO may discharge into the water body, but it may be a relatively short duration, or it may discharge a bit, stop, and then discharge again, particularly if the storm remains in the area or if the rainfall continues to be, rather intense. So we were viewing this as those CSOs which exceed 2 hours of duration being the ones that are most likely to present some type of public health threat. The goal, of course, of these regs is to have the public avoid contact with the water during CSO events in order to avoid the potential for some type of public health risk from untreated or partially treated sewerage. All sanitary sewer overflows require notification under 314 CMR 16. So anytime you got a public advisory notification from the permittee that a regulated sanitary sewer overflow has occurred, then you should be issuing a public health warning. This is, untreated sewerage and, has the highest potential for a public health, creating a public health impact. And then there's also some discretionary authority that we have provided to boards of health. These are anytime that there's a CSO or partially treated discharge less than 2 hours in duration, if the Board of Health determines that there is a risk to public health. So that's within your authority to determine, in addition to the other two events that are prescribed by the regs. And if there's more than one discharge on the same water body, because sometimes multiple CSOs discharge into the same water body, the Board of Health can determine if more than one public health warning is necessary or if one is sufficient. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the information that is required to be contained in public health warnings from boards of health. The first you should be aware of is that the statute required that when one of these regulated events occurs, that the Board of Health would use an existing emergency notification system, including reverse 911 call system if available. We have broadly defined the term of 911 call system because we're aware that many communities use other types of systems. Some are known as Code Red. There are probably others. And that is the way that municipalities may get important information out to their residents in a timely or emergency sort of way. In the public health warning, there is certain information required: the receiving waters affected, location, date, and time of the discharge or overflow, which is information you'll be receiving from the permittees. The recommendation to avoid contact with the water for 48 hours, information about where to find closure status of beaches, shellfish growing areas, and other water resource areas, and access to translations of the warning for EJ populations lacking English language proficiency. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about this last bullet in a few moments, but I did want to make you aware that MassDEP has used what we refer to as our language bank. It's MassDEP employees who have proficiency or fluency in other languages. And we have used our language bank to translate certain information that will be necessary to include on the public health warnings and the signs. And so we're in the process of finalizing that information, and we're going to make both information for the signs as well as for the a template for the public health warnings available in those other languages. Next slide, please. So one of the provisions of the regs is that when public health warnings are issued, the Board of Health must post or cause to be posted temporary signage or to use a permanent sign in a conspicuous location that affords access to water bodies. The permanent signs installed by CSO permittees can be used for this purpose. And so we have been, we were as expansive as we could think to be in the regulations in terms of giving the ability of boards of health and permittees to modify the permanent signs in a fashion that would allow you to post a temporary notice. So say a CSO event is occurring, there might be a system of flashing lights, a text message, or a QR code or a URL that would be available where a person could click on the URL or scan the QR code and be taken to the Board of Health website or web page where they would get current or up-to-date information about that CSO discharge. The purpose, of course, is for people who might be going to the water body to shellfish or fish, or to have some kind of recreational activity, swimming or boating, for example, that they would have timely information about it to know if there had been a CSO discharge in the recent past that may, adversely affect water quality and potentially pose a threat to public health. The SSOs will always require a temporary sign, and as we talked about earlier, because the locations of SSO events are not predictable, they don't typically occur in the same place, all the time, that, we're asking boards of health to post a temporary sign at the locations of sanitary sewer overflows so that the public can avoid contact with that sewerage, which may be discharged to a water body. Next slide, please. There's certain information, signage for public health warnings. This signage has to include certain information. This first phrase or sentence, warning, avoid contact with the water, may cause illness, is a required element of the signs. This is the phrase or sentence that we've had translated into the 6 most common languages spoken in Massachusetts other than English. And we're going to make that information available to you all for your use. In addition, there are infographics that are depicting no fishing, boating, or swimming. Again, that is to reach members of the population who may not have language proficiency. The reason for the warning is to inform the public about sewage in surface waters, the approximate date, time, and duration of the discharge, information about where to find the closure status of beaches, shellfish growing areas, and other water resource areas, Board of Health or Health Department contact information, and for EJ populations that lack English language proficiency, translation of statement in the first bullet and access to the translation of the remainder of that text, again, which we're working on providing a template for boards of health to use. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the first regulations that I have seen at MassDEP which contain specific environmental justice components. I think that this is something that you're going to see more often in the future with MassDEP regulations, and I know that there is a great deal of effort being expended at the federal government level as well to make environmental justice a part of the regulatory programs in which they participate or administer. So this is something I think that you will see more of in the future. One of the requirements of the statute is that the permittee has a requirement to contact news organizations that serve EJ populations for the public advisory notifications. They have to provide language translation as appropriate for the public advisory notification, the signage at the public access points, and the public notice of the CSO public notification plan. And then that language translation requirement applies also to boards of health who are issuing public health warnings or posting temporary signs at access points. The statute requires that the media outlet that serves EJ populations for public notices of CSO public notification plans be included. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a couple of slides where we're going to talk about a little more in detail about EJ populations that lack English language proficiency. So there is an environmental justice policy that was adopted by our secretariat the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And that environmental justice policy identifies 3 types of populations that are subject to the EJ policy. One is based on the percentage of a municipality's population that is comprised of minorities. The second is involved with a percentage of median household income that indicates, you know, an environmental justice population. And the third, and the one which pertains to these regulations, is anywhere where there is 25% or more of households that lack English language proficiency. This determination of the lack of English language proficiency has been determined by self-identification of those groups. And Andrea, if you could click on that first link with me, and you may have to reshare your screen after it, you know, after it loads, but I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit more detail of how this works. Great, thank you, Andrea. So you'll see a list of all the municipalities in the Commonwealth on the left-hand side of this screen. And in the second column, you see the EJ criteria. And the M stands for the minority population percentage of that municipality. And the I stands for that community has triggered the income criterion under the EJ policy. And then if you scroll down for us a bit, Andrea, we will see that the first one I see here is the city of Boston that has an E in that second column. That E is an indication that in that community, there is a percentage of the population that lacks English language proficiency. And so you can see that on this first screen here, that also Brockton and Brookline. And then if you want to just scroll through, you'll see the other, you know, scroll through slowly and people may be able to spot their own municipality here and determine which one of them have the E. This web link that we're showing you is posted to our website. It's contained in the combined sewer overflow notification plan that permittees are filing. So if you go to that plan and click on that link, it's either in the plan or the instructions. You go to that and click on that link, you'll be able to get to this screen that Andrea is showing us now to determine if you know, your community has environmental justice populations that trigger that English language proficiency criterion under the policy. Okay, thanks, Andrea. If you want to close out that screen and then reshare that slide, and we'll click on the next link, and I can walk people through how to determine which languages are spoken in their community. So this link will show census tracts where at least 5% of the population has speakers who self-identify as not speaking English very well. And so, Andrea, if you click on that link and then reshare your screen, I think we'll be able to see a map initially, and then other information we'll want to show to the people attending.
Sure, sorry, this link for some reason isn't working for me, so I'm gonna try that one more time.
Okay.
There it goes. Okay.
Looks like it's going.
Is that sharing, or do I need to reshare it?
Yeah, we're seeing that. If you want to click the OK button on that disclaimer screen, it should go away. There you go. And if you'll use the hand tool to just kind of grab and pull the map down to, I find that it's easy to find New Bedford, which I know has some English language proficiency populations within its residents. So if you want to just move down to New Bedford, You should be able to see it. It's there in Buzzards Bay with a little peninsula that extends down into a little more to, you'll see it colored. This is one indicator, is that those municipalities that are subject to the policy are indicated by a color code system in this, in the map. And it's just, if you take your cursor and go up, there you go. I think that should be it. Pull on down a little bit further south until you see that peninsula sticking out into the water.
Sorry, there's a delay in,
yeah.
Do you want me to zoom in?
Just if you click on it, it should work.
Okay,
click right there in that purple part, if you would. Oh, bummer. Okay, I don't know if y'all can see that because it's pretty small on this screen, but what you see is there is that it indicates that the language is spoken. There are Portuguese or Portuguese Creole, and that is spoken by, it looks like 6.6% of the population. And so that would be subject to the EJ policy. And this this tool really is really useful for us all to use it and determine, where there are English language proficiency lacking populations and what languages they need. Again, we're providing you with some translation for the 6 most common languages other than English. And so this will help to identify, and the real purpose of this, of course, is to make sure that populations who may be lacking in English language proficiency are able to read and understand the notifications that they receive and the signage that they may see posted as a temporary sign at a public access point, in hopes that it would help them to avoid contact with contaminated water. Okay, I believe that's our last slide. The next slide, I believe, is going to be my contact information. So if you can, share that with folks, give them a moment to jot down my contact info if they need it. There you are. And Susanna King is the NPDES section chief on my staff. Susie has been one of the team members who have collaborated with us on developing these regulations, really an essential person to this effort. And, you can contact either of us at these email addresses. And looking like we still have some time left, despite all the technical problems we had at the beginning. So I'd be happy to take questions if people have.
Great. We'll start off with one of your favorites, Eldon. This is quoting the actual permit. New permanent signage required at public access points affected by CSO discharges. And the question is there a method to describe how far downstream is considered affected, or is it any public access point downstream?
Yeah, and Andrea's teasing me because this is a difficult question to answer. The statute had this language in it, which, I certainly understand the purpose of it. So it's not just communities in which the outfall occurs or the discharge occurs, but it's those that may be affected by it downstream. And unfortunately, it's extremely difficult to know exactly how far sort of a plume or blob of, contaminated water may remain intact and travel, downstream in a water body. Some of the communities that have CSOs have used models that predict that and can determine how far downstream, bacteria may stay viable and therefore present some threat to public health. But there's so many variables that go into this, such as the size of the discharge. It might be just a small volume of the discharge. As I mentioned earlier, that there are intermittent discharges, could be a small volume, or, it could be a very large volume. It could be a sustained CSO discharge over a long period of time. You'll recall how rainy last July was. And, we had something like 20 days of rain. There were numerous CSO discharges. And in events like that, it could be that water within the water body or waterway stays contaminated for a significant period of time. as it travels downstream. So there's not a good answer. I don't have a good answer, unfortunately, for that question. We've been working with permittees to try and predict that, particularly if they happen to have the kinds of models that I was talking about, which can help predict it. Next slide, please.
All right, next question. So along those lines, what if the public access is in another town?
Right. So if the public access is in another town, but the permittee has determined that there's a potential for untreated or partially treated sewerage to reach that town, then they should be contacting that downstream town and saying, there is this potential, and we'd like to work with you on the appropriate locations for for signage. I mentioned earlier that we are working on posting a GIS layer that will help call attention to state-owned or controlled public access points. So that should be of some use to you, because we'll also have the locations of CSO outfalls posted, and so you can see if your community is downstream of one of those CSO communities, and whether it's appropriate for you to publish or post rather signage at a public access point in your town.
Okay. Will municipalities or health departments be receiving any funding for the signage?
Right. Yeah, this is another difficult question, not so much to answer, because the answer is there was no funding provided by the statute for administration of this. So the costs, just to be clear about the costs that boards of health may, that may affect boards of health really, are the requirement to post the public health warnings, issue public health warnings, that's staff time and so forth, and to post temporary signs. Now, in some of these communities that have multiple CSO discharge locations, staff time involved could be substantial. And that is one of the reasons that we built into the regs this potential to have permanent signs that could be modified, by some type of activation, meaning a blinking light, a text message, a QR code, a URL, or other method that would allow you to sort of update a permanent sign when there is an event occurring. If you don't hear from the permittees in the relatively near future, because they're supposed to be, developing these CSO plans for submittal to us by May 1st, then I suggest that you contact them and ask them about it, and see if, they have considered that permanent sign and some method of their permanent sign to indicate in a temporary way that an event has occurred.
Okay, the next question is relative to the environmental justice information you provided. They want to confirm that if you have an M in the second column for the community, then no translation is needed. But if you have an E, then you do need notifications to be translated into another language.
Yes, that is correct. That's my understanding. And you can take a look, those links that we provided. I think you'll be able to get to the environmental justice policy, read it in more detail, and there's a bit more information that you might, want to consider.
Okay, and then the last question, unless one comes in while, oh, another one popped up, so not the last question. If you have an SSO in a forested or wooded area, does that need notification requirements under the new law? What if the SSO in the woods was a few hundred feet to a water body?
Yeah. So just hearing that description, my take on it is it would not likely be an event that triggered 314 CMR 16. Now, the permittee would have responsibilities under other Mass DEP regs to notify us of that sanitary sewer overflow. But the three types of sanitary sewer overflow events that we're targeting with these regs, and it was based really on language in the statute, is those that are reaching a surface water. And they have to be reaching that surface water in one of the three ways that I described. One is that the flow is conveyed through a wastewater outfall. Another is that there be a pump station of 1 million gallons per day or more. And of course, now I've stranded myself on what the second one is that was posted on the sign earlier. I posted on the slide rather.
Which slide number?
It's probably like slide number 4, I think.
I missed it.
Okay, sorry, go one at a time real quick if you would. And it'll be the one that has the SSO events. Yep. One more. There you go. Oh yeah, it was the carrying capacity in that. So it's surcharging, where you have the surcharging of the pipes so that there is inability to convey the total flow.
Okay. And the next question from Joe. Hi, Joe. Can you provide more information on what qualifies as a media outlet for notification purposes? Does a digital-only platform satisfy the requirement?
A digital-only platform would satisfy the requirements. We have not tried to define that. The statute required sort of 3 elements, that the largest 2 media outlets be notified, and that third, that one of those or a media outlet also serve the EJ population. So the statute had broad language. We chose to leave that language broad in the regs, specifically because we want, municipalities to be able to use what they think are the most effective media outlet means to reach their residents.
Okay. That is all the questions that we have, that I've seen posted. So I'm going to stop the screen share now. And I did post the link to MassDEP's website that has information about the new regulations, and also has the March 24th recorded session, and will contain today's session cleaned up version. And we'll post that to the website. So unless there's any final questions, I will just say thank you, Weldon, so much for giving us that really in-depth overview of the new regulations. And thank you all for bearing with us as we got situated with our technical difficulties. And if you have any questions about anything that you've heard today, you have Weldon's contact information. And you also can reach out to your regional office, either wastewater chief or deputy regional director. Okay, and with that, we'll say thank you to everyone. Do you want to add anything else, Weldon?
Just thank you to everybody for their patience and their help in getting through this presentation. And thanks to you, Andrea, for all your help.
All right, thanks everyone. Bye, have a great day.
Bye.